Committee. During her remarks today, Dr. Ford recounted the alleged incident. Let's watch that.
I believed he was going to rape me. I tried to yell for help. When I did, Brett put his hand over my mouth to stop me from yelling. This is what terrified me the most and has had the most lasting impact on my life. It was hard for me to breathe, and I thought that Brett was accidentally going to kill me. Both Brett and Mark were drunkenly laughing during the attack. They seemed to be having a very good time. Mark seemed ambivalent, at times urging Brett on, and at times telling him to stop. A couple of times I made eye contact with Mark and thought he might try to help me, but he did not.
So compelling. And joining me right now is U.S. Congresswoman Anna Eshoo from California, Cynthia Alksne, former federal prosecutor, Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com, and Shannon Pettypiece of Bloomberg News and the White House correspondent for them. Congresswoman, thank you. I've known you a long time. I think you're a great person. I just want to ask you, did you know it was this bad when she first came to you? This is about attempted rape, fear of being killed, if accidentally, but killed by this perp. And what do you think of Brett Kavanaugh now, at the end of this day?
Well, thank you, Chris, for having me on. I think that, first of all, I'm so proud of my constituent, Dr. Ford. I mean, she offered compelling, honest, really riveting testimony, but it's such an honest, clear, plain way in a very soft voice. And when you compare this morning and her testimony with this afternoon, where there was anger and sniping at senators and really, I think, a belligerence on the part of Judge Kavanaugh. You know, in life, you listen to quiet people. They have a quiet confidence. And then you listen to someone that is yelling and shouting and talking over people. I had a sense of what is this man trying to hide? So there was a clear contrast between the two. And she said, "I'm here and I'm terrified." When she said what she recalled most vividly to Senator Leahy, the laughter, yes, laughing at me. I think that for me, that will remain with me always. And it's the exact story that she shared with me when she first came to meet with me and reveal what experience she had and talk about where she wanted the information to go to.
But just for the record, everything you heard today squares with what she said to you initially when she first came to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Republicans, while not attacking Dr. Ford, have questioned whether she's mistaken, a case of mistaken ID, I guess. She was asked about that during the hearing today. Let's watch.
Dr. Ford, I'll just conclude with this. You do remember what happened, do you not?
Very much so.
Last night, the Republican staff of this committee released to the media a timeline that shows that they've interviewed two people who claim they were the ones who actually assaulted you. I'm asking you to address this new defense of mistaken identity directly. Dr. Ford, with what degree of certainty do you believe Brett Kavanaugh assaulted you?
100%.
Cynthia Alksne, you're a pro at this. I'm not. I always wonder if I was sitting on a jury, and not in this case, but in anyone. How do you know who's telling the truth?
No one would put you on a jury, Chris.
Well, you know, as a journalist, I've never been able to get on one, unfortunately, because I would love to get on. No, this question of Kavanaugh's defense, it didn't seem to me like a real defense. He had this global defense. I never did anything. But when he was asked about being a belligerent drunk, which is really the issue, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde problem with this guy, if it's real. The idea that when he drinks too much, he's a bad guy. He's aggressive. He may even be a criminal in that extent of assault. He didn't like that question. He didn't really answer it. And my question is, he seemed to be more angry at the fact that this old stuff's being brought up than he was indignant that anybody would accuse him of this stuff, because I heard a guy defending his resume. I didn't hear a guy really showing indignant emotions that anybody would say he would behave like this. He seemed uncomfortable with that and seemed to be hedging. Your thoughts?
Well, I had a couple thoughts about him. First, I thought he basically had a tantrum and showed that he doesn't have the temperament to be a Supreme Court justice, and he also showed that he can be an angry and belligerent person, and you just felt like, oh, well, that's what he's like when he's angry and belligerent when he's drunk. Can you imagine if a woman came into the Senate chamber and screamed and hollered at senators like that and interrupted them and was that rude? She'd be taken out in a straitjacket. But because it's Judge Kavanaugh, he got away with it. I thought it was shocking. The other thing
I don't
that
think
was
he got
amazing,
away with it because you were watching. Let's watch that so everybody knows what you're talking about. Here's Kavanaugh being combated with the Democrats on the committee. Let's watch.
And what you're saying, if I understand it, is that the allegations by Dr. Ford, Ms. Ramirez, and Ms. Swetnick are wrong.
Yeah, that is emphatically what I'm saying. Emphatically. The Swetnick thing is a joke. That is a farce.
Would you like to say more about it?
No. Senator, let me take a step back and explain high school. I was number one in the class. Freshman.
And I thought
no.
I thought only the Senate.
You got this up. I'm gonna talk about my high school. No. I'm gonna
let him answer.
I'm gonna talk about my high school record. If you're gonna sit here and mock me.
Well, back to you, Cynthia. How would you describe that public personality you just saw from the judge? Cynthia.
Oh, I would describe that as a person who does not have the temperament to be a Supreme Court justice. And additionally, he really hurt his credibility by dancing around and trying to avoid responding to the question about an FBI investigation. And the way he would say, oh, they're just 302s, or they're just this, or they're just that. We all know, those of us in the law enforcement community, and so does he, that when the FBI would go to interview Mark Judge, that would be a critical interview. And no such thing has occurred. And according to this victim, Mark Judge was in the room. He is a critical witness. There is no excuse that he hasn't been called. And the way the judge was constantly trying to get away with responding to that is damages his credibility beyond repair for me.
Yeah, I know both sides are politicians. You're not going to tell me the Democrats aren't big Democrats tonight. But I do want to ask this question. What's the rush?
Well,
Jason,
the rush is because
they don't have a case for a rush.
No, none at all. They just don't want more of these allegations to come out.
So they want to stop the clock.
They want to stop the clock. They want to push this through as fast as they can. What I found is this. Look, if you were a Republican and you were hoping and praying that he wouldn't absolutely implode, you might feel slightly more comfortable after what you saw today.
We just heard that Senator Flake is saying he doesn't know how he's going to vote. If they lose him and the two women, it's over.
Exactly. And that's pretty much what they're facing right now. Right. And I don't know how they're going to vote on this at the end, but I will say this. For your regular citizens, right, who are just catching this tonight because they haven't been watching it all day, they see a guy who's supposed to be on the Supreme Court who is yelling and arguing and screaming, who tried to say that his whole high school experience was American Pie, but everything we've heard about him is Porky's and Animal House, the drinking, the boozing. That whole story about Renate alumni, nobody buys that who went to high school. He sounded like a terrible liar.
You know, I wondered why. Look, I'm not going to. I thought the Democrats were Johnny One Notes. They say FBI. Now, that was I always say be coherent. They were coherent. Everybody said the same thing. Let's go to FBI. Good move. But I wonder why there wasn't better questioning of his belligerence and his drinking. They all talk about the gang raping and all that colorful information we've been getting for the last few days. They didn't really get into that and say, was there a culture of this kind of behavior? Right. Did you ever go to a so-called party where this kind of behavior was going on?
Well, I think these committee hearings often turn into this debate over process and the talking past each other in this insider conversation about an FBI investigation when people don't care about that. They're interested in this person's character. But I think the Democrats, it seemed, got a little nervous about him looking like the victim. I think he is following a playbook that is often followed when people are accused, either rightfully or wrongfully, of deny, attack, and become the victim. We saw it with Clarence Thomas. We saw it with Bill Clinton. It is something that Donald Trump mimics all the time. So if he came off looking like a victim and they came off attacking this man with his daughter and his wife and his mom in the front row, how was that going to make them?
What did you make of Lindsey Graham's cri de guerre? I mean, his call to war. I mean, Jason, it was personal with this guy. He was accusing all the Democrats of being bad guys, bad women, the whole thing.
Right, and then he's like, oh, I've been ambushed. Look, I didn't buy that, right? And I thought it was over the top, just like his crying at the beginning.
But it was personal, though.
It was personal.
Why did he do it? What was his emotion? What was his motive?
His emotion is, one, he wants to make sure that he is in there with Donald Trump. He wants to make sure that he's defending what his boss wants. And then, two, the only way this could work is if you try and make it more personal than Dr. Ford.
And the White House clearly liked it. I don't know if he was performing to an audience of one, but Sarah Sanders tweeted about it instantly, and so did Donald Trump Jr.
I think there's some invasion of the body snatchers here, the Republican Party. Some of this behavior is frightening. They're so afraid of that guy who controls 90% of the Republican voters.
Right. Well, and with John McCain gone, too, I think there's a bit of a different tone.
Yeah.
Change of reality. Anyway, Kavanaugh was asked about his drinking habits. Let's watch.
So let me, if I can, return to a line of questioning my colleague was on before, which was about whether you've ever gotten aggressive while drinking or forgotten an evening after drinking.
Those are two different questions. I've already answered the second one. As to the first, I think the answer to that is basically no. I don't know really what you mean by that. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, the reason
I don't mean it that way, but no is the basic answer, unless you're talking about something that I'm not aware of that you're going to ask about.
Here we go. Cynthia, you're the expert. It looked like that. I said this before. That's the question he didn't like. And everybody knows what a bad drunk is. Anybody's been at it on any social occasion, you bump into people who don't know how to hold their booze. They don't get happy and friendly and tell funny jokes. They get mean. And he knows what that meant, and he didn't want the question because he didn't want the answer.
Right. He does know, and he knows that his roommate from college said he was a mean drunk.
Of course, he said he didn't like his roommate from freshman year.
Oh, of course he didn't.
In all fairness, you don't pick your freshman year roommates. Let's get that straight. And we all know that story. How many first-year students have the same roommates the second year, their sophomore year? So I can get that part.
I love my freshman year roommate.
Okay, well, you're lucky. But go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, it's an interesting question about whether or not he could have been so drunk, and he and his buddy were so drunk that they don't. This incident was of so little moment to them that even though she remembers it for all time, he doesn't even remember it. And that seems to me to be sort of where this incident probably happened, that they were so drunk they don't remember.
But he remembers not remembering.
And he remembers that he was never there, even though he doesn't know what the date is.
Okay, that's my problem. I'm going to go back to everybody here because I'll start with you, though. You're the expert on this. Global denial. He denied ever drinking too much to excess, never being blacking out, never being forgetful of something, never being at a party the whole junior year. Junior is doing nothing but jock stuff and going to stuff with his father and working his butt off. And, he denied going out, basically, that whole summer.
That's right.
How
convenient. He also says constantly that the 4 witnesses back him up. They do not. That just is not true. 2 people... the 2 of the women who were downstairs don't have any memory of this either way, and why would they? Because they were not upstairs when it happened. And Mark Judge is the 3rd person. He was in the room and is a co-perp. Why would he say he remembers it? So he constantly repeated that as if at some point we're all going to be so stupid we're going to believe it. He also went on and on about his yearbook, about all it was also incredibly innocent. And we love this woman whose name begins with R, who I refuse to say her name because it's so obnoxious.
I agree with you.
The way he treated her. And he expects us to believe that. And he thinks we're dumb. If he just says it, we'll agree. It's insulting that he does that. And it's insulting that the Republicans don't have any desire to find out the truth and to have this guy, Mark Judge, interviewed. It is critical to deciding whether or not this guy should be on the Supreme Court. And here's what's going to happen. At some point, Mark Judge cannot continue to hide out at the beach with his comic books. At some point, someone's going to find out what happened. And if this guy is on the Supreme Court and he says something else, he's injured the Supreme Court in a huge way. I mean, the whole Supreme Court is being injured here by this. It's sort of the last institution that anybody had a respect for. And now it's going to be dragged through the mud.
I think we have counter plans here. The Democrats want to take all the time they can get to show this guy's deficiencies, and the Republicans want to have a quick call tomorrow as fast as they get one. Anyway, in defending himself from these allegations, Judge Kavanaugh blamed Democrats, saying the events of the last couple of weeks represent revenge on behalf of the Clintons, among other things. Let's listen.
This whole 2-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit, fueled with apparent pent-up anger about President Trump and the 2016 election, fear that has been unfairly stoked about my judicial record, revenge on behalf of the Clintons, and millions of dollars in money from outside left-wing opposition groups. This is a circus.
Well, it was a partisan, often combative display, as you just saw, but when it came time to hear from the most crucial Republican on the committee, Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona, he, the senator from Arizona, did not tip his hand as to how he might vote when it comes to it. Let's watch him.
I would just urge my colleagues to recognize that in the end, we are 21 very imperfect senators trying to do our best to provide advice and consent. And in the end, there is likely to be as much doubt as certainty going out of this room today. And that as we make decisions going forward, I hope that people will recognize that. And in the rhetoric that we use and the language that we use going forward, that we'll recognize that there is doubt. We'll never move beyond that. And just have a little humility on that front. So thank you.